Welcome to everyone else that's joined already. Thank you so much for joining us today for the launch of our growth webinar series, where we'll be discussing particularly around growth strategies and speed to insights, with a focus obviously on Fintech Product Analytics. Joining us today, we have our CEO, Kelvin Jonk from YOUKNOW Technologies. Special day for us. It's our 10th birthday. So it's always lovely to kick off with something like this, bringing everyone together. We're also joined by Brad Watt from Kuda, VP of Growth in that space. So honored to have him there. And then we also have Tom from Mixpanel, our sales engineer in that space. So very excited to have this group gathered together just to talk about growth strategies. We've got some really cool topics that we'll be discussing. But I'm just going to hand over to Kelvin just to kind of kick us off as to why this series exists and why you're here with us today.
Thanks, Cami. Good to see some names I recognize popping in here. So excited to have this chat. Just wanted to say before we kick off, welcome. This is the launch of what we're calling our growth webinar series. It's YOUKNOW's first stepping stone to building a community of growth and product-led teams here in SA. So we know that the marketers and the data teams and all of these other teams have been getting invites to events and webinars for years. But we want to recognize that this is a kind of an emerging growth sphere within our industries. It's an evolving space that people have ended up in and didn't necessarily think they would be in it 3 to 5 years ago. So there's a lot of working out what does it mean and what does it take to be successful in this space. The professionals are dealing with new facets and aspects to their job, and there's this great intersection between growth marketing and product-led growth. So YOUKNOW's view of this has been from a position as a technology partner, mostly in the consumer engagement and in the consumer insight space. But we've watched companies, as kind of our clients and our companies focus more and more on first-party data, on high growth metrics, and a lot of real-time data to compete in this world that basically feels like it's changing almost monthly. We're fortunate enough to have multiple global partners that focus on the sector, and so we wanted to bring a lot of the international learnings, the more experienced learnings and advice to local teams and to the segment in particular, while it's growing and while it's learning. At YOUKNOW, we really pride ourselves on being bridge builders and we connectors, so it seemed like a natural fit for us to start growing this community. And please watch the space as we introduce more of these kinds of sessions, events like next week's data drafts event, which we'll mention at some point. And today's session, we really wanted to start with the fintech space because we see it as the space where a lot of innovation is taking place at a pace that requires the right kind of tooling and the right kind of skills. So we knew that our partners at Mixpanel were the ideal partners to launch this series with because of their focus on real-time actionable analytics. So with that, I'm gonna hand back to Cami, and I hope that you find that the session valuable. Enjoy.
Thanks, KJ. And I just firstly want to say welcome to everyone. I know we're joining from across the continent, so we appreciate you being here today, particularly if there is a bit of a time difference. So thank you. I think why we wanted to kick off this session with Mixpanel, it goes without saying that growth and analytics kind of go hand in hand. You won't have growth if you're not tracking against anything. So it was a natural fit for us to launch the series with our partner Mixpanel. They've been amazing to deal with and they were super excited to get on board. So I think it's just thank you from my side to Mixpanel for being here today. And with that, we also have Tom joining us, as I said, a sales engineer entrenched in tech and analytics, and going to provide some really interesting insights from trends he's seen in the fintech industry, working with a few of you in this space. So please, if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in and we can direct them to Tom. We're also really grateful to Mixpanel for introducing us to Bradley Watt from Kuda, the VP of growth in that space. Chatting to him yesterday was really amazing just to hear more about his background and his kind of career path to where he got to, or how he got to where he is today. I'm sure he'll talk about it in a bit more detail, but really fascinating from that performance marketing into the product space, and how that kind of like catapult and leverage him into growth. So again, please feel free to pick his brains. Got some amazing advice that he's already shared with me beforehand, more hands that I would love for him to cover in the session today. So yeah, I think Tom, Brad, if you guys want to just do a little hello to everyone, and then we can kind of kick off with the first question.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Hi, everybody. Yeah, as Cami summed me up pretty well, but I am a sales engineer here at Mixpanel, so I support a lot of the technical side of our pre-sale processes, whether that's working with our fast-growing customers across EMEA and Africa to some of our more enterprise organizations in places like the Middle East, for instance. I've been at Mixpanel for a few years now. I've got another anniversary coming up in about January, and I am coming to you today from a very, very, very rainy London. Okay, so you might notice the British accent, but we're in London today, and it's not the best morning. But otherwise, yeah, happy to be here, happy to be supporting our partners in YOUKNOW. And yeah, looking forward to this session.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, thanks for inviting me along to this. Excited to tell Kuda's story and share a little bit about how we're feeling growth. As Cami mentioned, I'm the VP of Growth at Kuda. I lead a cross-functional team focused on improving metrics throughout the entire customer journey. We can dive into that in more detail in a moment. But for those of you that don't know Kuda, we're a money app for Africans on a mission to make financial services accessible, affordable, and rewarding for every African on the planet. And we do this by providing a better alternative to traditional finance, by delivering digital onboarding and a wide range of financial products. We have over 6 million customers. We've raised north of 90 million to date and valuation of 500 million. So yeah, definitely have scaled over the last few years. A little bit more about me, knocking on 2 decades in the digital space. My focus has primarily been on performance marketing and app technology. And I've always had a keen interest and involvement on the product side. I've had the privilege of working with startups, scale-ups, and a little company called Apple, where I played a pivotal role in helping developers shift their business model from paid to freemium, mostly through monetizing their apps with advertising.
Thank you, Brad. So you've already covered just, I think, a little bit of your career path, but I think it is quite fascinating, particularly as we are busy trying to build this community locally around growth. I think a lot of people are excited to hear a bit more about your path and how you ended up the VP of growth. And you've also mentioned previously to me personally, sharing your thoughts, particularly around growth marketing versus product-led growth. What are the differences and where do they align?
Yeah, definitely I can dive into that. So I'm actually kind of heavily entrenched in both, kind of growth marketing and product-led growth. And I think my career kind of naturally steered me in this direction. I started off at Trade Doubler, which was, Europe's largest affiliate network, and data and performance metrics took center stage there. During my time there, I managed clients like American Express, so got, good kind of knowledge of the fintech space, but I was also hunting down innovative new publishers to fuel the affiliate program. So that was also kind of first taste of kind of working in a growth space. And all very, kind of marketing led. I then moved to Apple, where, integrating ads is really a key product decision. It significantly impacts the user experience. So while I was dealing with some companies that had, marketing professionals and established advertising teams, often on the game side, I'd be dealing with founders or, the product teams as they tried to navigate, how to integrate the ads. And that was really kind of a passionate topic for me in how not to destroy the user experience with ads, because we all know, famously Steve Jobs said, mobile ads suck. So yeah, we were on a mission to improve that. So that was a good mix of different kind of skills. Then I dived back into the data world, specifically attribution with AppsFlyer, which kind of further reinforced the importance of metrics and analytics. And also they have a very strong partner network, Mixpanel being one of them. So that's where I got the exposure and kind of initial introduction to product analytics. So yeah, it's kind of been a long journey of flip-flopping between different areas. And I think that really solidifies kind of the growth mindset in kind of approaching, a cross-functional team and kind of looking at metrics across the funnel. you kind of asked like what are the differences? I kind of firmly believe that taking a holistic approach and being cross-functional, and looking at the entire funnel when you're a growth practitioner. Growth marketing definitely drives top-line metrics, but it can have a limited impact if you aren't looking at deeper into the customer journey, and kind of understanding how customers move through that funnel. Where they align, I think even in growth marketing, there's a fundamental product and engineering requirement. Whether this involves kind of capturing the data, and sharing that with the ad networks on the digital side. You obviously have to be integrating SDKs, you have to be building attribution models. And then there's kind of the more producty side where, developing referral, loyalty, incentive programs, all key elements of growth marketing, but absolutely have a product and engineering requirement to them. And, kind of most recently, I also see building marketing into the app, where customers are most engaged as kind of a key area for me on the growth marketing and combining it with the product side.
Yeah, I can agree. And then how has this approach impacted the way that Kuda's internal teams have defined the function of growth? Who owns the insights and how are they shared across the business?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So yeah, impacting to internal teams. I think, every company should have its own blend of what a growth team looks like. At the end of the day, everybody in the company is focused on growth. But what that kind of core team or core growth team focuses on, that's maybe where it differs. And that really depends on the growth leader that you bring into your business. For my team specifically, we are heavily focused on the data side of marketing and product. And it's why we have a cross-functional team, and also what allows us to kind of build this marketing into the product. Also just looking again kind of internally, I guess another nuance that we have is that we're somewhat agnostic to the market, where the core teams have a much better understanding of the customer. And this is really unique to Kuda based on the makeup of the team. And, kind of how we share insights and who owns that. Again, we have a core data team that's building, kind of obviously the core data pipelines and sharing insights with the business. But in terms of kind of growth metrics and insights, it's currently, it sits heavily with my team. But we're definitely on a journey to democratize that further and have all of the PMs in the business looking at the metrics, understanding what's having an impact on the KPIs of the product.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to bring in Tom over here because you've obviously worked with various clients in the fintech industry. Have you seen a shift towards these cross-functional teams and guess this democratization of data? Or is there still that push and pull that you're seeing between the marketing and product teams?
Yeah, I think it's really a combination of them both actually. Like if we start with this, what kind of this push and pull setup looks like, often we find there's kind of two common themes between product and marketing, especially in this like growth space, right? Where we have this sort of not necessarily clash for success, because I think Brad really hit the nail on the head, which is everybody should be focused on growth. But often you can find, especially in teams which don't have an out-and-out growth team, they can find that often they fight over the same resource, right? A lot of the more traditional, so sort of larger banks that we work with, they generally will have like an out-and-out data team, right? Somebody who is very proficient in a BI tool, who can get answers to a question which maybe, me or somebody else in the team can't get access to. But that leads to a whole load of, not really issues, because of course it's great having a BI team and whatnot, but generally that leads product and marketing teams to having limited tooling themselves. Okay, and when teams start fighting over resource, fighting over questions and whatnot, that means that there are questions that don't get answered. And Brad, I'm sure you've seen this before, where if you ask somebody a question, you don't know how to get the answer, it's not, the onus isn't on them to get the answer, right? And unfortunately that often means that we see this delay in between somebody asking a question and somebody actually getting an answer, and can be this 2-week lag between you asking a question about your product or your marketing metrics or whatever it might be, and actually getting that answer does take that 2 weeks. And by that point, especially, in a really growing market, a really evolving market, that doesn't really cut the mustard anymore. Okay, and when teams don't get answers to their questions, often there's a bit of disenthusement and whatnot, but it just means that the business doesn't drive forward in that growth way that it should. Okay. The other part is very much about, well, what about when they do have their own tools and they do have that expertise and whatnot? Well, then we kind of see this approach where teams don't really speak the same language. And that really means that, hey, look, we're a marketing team. We have this great piece of tooling, this great data set, and we can get the answers we need. But if there's that disconnect with what product they actually are achieving with that data, there's a clash in terms of that success. Okay, and that might come from the disconnection between metrics and whatnot. For instance, we're seeing quite a big moment where we see your marketing teams focusing on CPA, as Brad, I'm sure you're quite familiar with. But the problem with that is when we focus just on CPA, it leaves a lot to be decided in terms of that customer journey, that adoption, that retention piece. Okay, and when we're only focusing on, only one half of the business is focusing on getting people through the door, and the other half is trying to keep them through the door, there is that disconnect. Okay, and that's what we're really trying to avoid here. And that's where kind of Mixpanel fits in this event analytics approach. We're not really product analytics anymore. We're not really marketing analytics anymore. With this event-based analytics. Okay, so when teams are using the same tool and they have the same data and ask the same questions, that's where growth really comes in, and where that fit for that democratization of data really, really plays its role.
Yeah, and I guess talking the same language needs to come from the top as well, top-down kind of approach, and kind of instilled in the company from the beginning. So I guess my next kind of question in that space is one thing from an operational level to structure teams, or from an exec level to define growth as an objective. But how important has it been for Kuda to tap into culture of growth? And what are you doing differently, and why is it working? And of course, where is there room to improve, Bradley?
All right, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think fostering, kind of that culture is really important. And it does kind of really significantly, rely on top level executive or founder support. And in, kind of establishing that environment where a growth team can thrive is pivotal. Often being embedded in various teams. So again, you're focusing on marketing, you're focusing on product, you're focusing on data. It can lead to a lot of friction if roles aren't clearly, defined, and if there's not that top level support to kind of empower the growth team to do very specific tasks. I guess for Kuda, I'm very fortunate. I'm in the Exco team, and I've had support from the founder from day one, whether that's been scaling the team or onboarding best of breed technology like Mixpanel, to build this kind of world-class growth stack that we have, or having the marketing budget to move the needle. So yeah, having that support is paramount. Otherwise, you're just going to run into kind of a lot of conflict, I think. Where we've been, we've been really kind of innovative in terms of the products that we build, and we have great technology under all of it. So that's a super, just having that support makes a huge difference. Where I think you asked also, like, where's there room to improve? And again, it's been a bit of a journey, right? Like perfecting our position in the product team took some time, but I think we're in a really good rhythm. We found our strengths and how we can effectively complement the core product team, who build the foundation for everything that we do, and again are building growth into the company by building new products. So that's been iterative, and again takes a lot of work and support from above. Likewise on the marketing side, we've been through a few iterations there, from me kind of overseeing marketing to bringing on leadership there, again, who kind of can really understand the local market, and then kind of freeing me up to kind of have more bandwidth on the wider growth scope. So we're constantly iterating, and I think as a company grows, it's important to always realign and have the best people for the job at the stage of the company. Was there another question there? I can't remember.
No, I think you've kind of covered both in that space. What I would be interested to loop in Tom over here is that as you've mentioned, it's about like establishing those roles and responsibilities, right? And I think the kind of same comes into play when onboarding a partner, and the communication is kind of key in that space. So Tom, how does a technology partner like Mixpanel, which is all about democratizing data, use kind of your enablement phase to assist your clients with fostering that culture of growth or tapping into their culture of growth?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think what Brad's mentioned there with this executive buy-in really plays into that the kind of role of it, right? Because we talk about how like having a democratized data state in a business is really important, but a democracy doesn't really work unless we have all of those tiers of hierarchy involved in this same approach, right? And that's where this kind of onboarding phase, or this enablement phase, we call it, really plays in. So when we kind of sit down with customers who've joined Mixpanel, and we say, hey, look, what are you trying to achieve here? And often it is trying to drive that increased data culture. And for us to do that, we really need several levels of buy-in. So we need that executive buy-in, as we've just kind of talked on, but we also need this kind of technical buy-in as well. So for instance, finding someone with the technical knowledge, the technical expertise of making sure that Mixpanel works, because ultimately this enablement phase is about getting the data in to the right people at the right time. Okay, and of course you can't really have a data democracy without data. So having that technical buy-in, that executive buy-in, and then finally it comes down to this like champion buy-in as well. And this will be somebody who we work with in this enablement phase to really become that data champion in the business, right? Part of becoming a data-driven organization and having a data democracy means you need to have those data leaders, right? And that can be anybody from that executive to somebody who's just a product manager or a data analyst. It doesn't really matter, as long as you have the passion and the enjoyment of data to drive that enablement across the business, right? Those champions really get driven by the use cases that we'll look at in kind of an enablement phase, right? Because if a company joins Mixpanel, they want to tackle their biggest problems first, which is absolutely the right way to approach this. So by driving these use cases early on and driving excitement in the business, that really helps bring that fostering of culture of data. If you go, oh, hey, we answered this really great and cool question, that really helps push other teams to go, oh, maybe we could answer that, for instance, or maybe we could answer something else that we can drive forwards. Now, all of these pieces really make part of that democratization of data, and some businesses have some of them and some of them don't. But ultimately, it's all part of like a journey to that culture of data and that democratization of data in the business. And it's not just it'll happen on day one. Honestly, it might take a few months to happen, right? And this enablement phase really just forms part of that growth cycle to reach that actual culture of data in a business.
Yeah, and
I'd love to maybe jump in on that if I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, so that's definitely been a journey that we've been on with Mixpanel. We before I kind of joined Kuda, was kind of advising, we kind of got Mixpanel in, but like there probably wasn't the right champion at the time. And our first implementation was not great. The scale, we got the scale wrong, we got the events wrong. But over time we've kind of learnt what you need to do to get it right, obviously with Mixpanel support. And just slowly as we build the champions, obviously as I scaled the team, we had a product lead that kind of really understood metrics better than, and engineers to kind of implement it. So yeah, it's definitely like a growing phase in growth to like start off small and kind of iterate and kind of understand, and hopefully you can have those champions early on, but they're super key to actually getting the insights that you need from the platform.
Like beyond data champions, what other advice would you have for companies that are starting to embark on their journey towards data-driven culture and effective decision-making?
Yeah, it kind of touches on what I just said. I think, it starts with kind of mapping out your events that need to be tracked. I think, again, initially, we didn't really have a good idea of what we wanted to look at. So we had too few events. I think maybe at some point we had too many, but really it's just kind of sitting down and, kind of understanding especially in a digital product, like what that looks like. So I think that's kind of the bedrock of kind of gaining these essential insights that you can get out of the tool. On the, kind of marketing front, You got to stay up to date with attribution methods and understand what networks are looking for. So again, that comes down to the tracking plan, the analytics. So again, it kind of feeds into that. We only really have two levers on the digital side now, whether it's creativity or the data that we're sending to the network. So it's super critical that we have those the right kind of plan in place to understand the customer. And then, of course, ensure that you have those resources to go out and kind of make those changes or build that plan, whether it's the engineering resources or the champions. On the product side, again, it relies heavily on kind of the engineering resources. I think, once you identify these bottlenecks, you need to have the resources to be able to essentially make the changes, right? And sometimes if you don't have that dedicated resource, it can be a big contest between, say, the core product team that's building like a really big feature that's obviously super important to the growth of the business, and kind of optimization can sometimes take the back seat because you're trying to ship something that's really big and impactful. So kind of understanding your insights first, then having the resources to kind of execute on those projects.
And I think Brad, you got a really good point there in terms of like we talk about like maybe the events we're tracking aren't right, maybe there's too many, maybe there's too few, and then the technical resource can be quite tied up. What a lot of companies maybe don't think about is like, okay, well, I look at my products and I can say I can track A, B, C, and D, but what companies don't necessarily think about is why we're tracking A, B, C, and D, right? Is there something we're trying to tie this to, right? And we see this at Mixpanel quite a lot, where customers will possibly done what you've done before and track maybe everything, and then they'll look at the implementation, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the line, and they've realized actually most of the stuff they've tracked, they've never used in a query, in a report, anything like that. And that means that you've kind of wasted all of that technical resource, that time thinking about what you want to track. So I just as a piece of advice there is make sure you're tying what you're tracking to something meaningful. Don't just be like, oh yeah, I'll track everything and think about it later. Think about people's time and just make sure what you're tracking actually makes sense. I think it's the big takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys are like fundamental in helping us understand that. Again, kind of really small, too few events, then too much. And it was really that, like, why are you tracking it? And it's still an evolution, right? I think I think we have around 60% product depth that's being kind of tracked at the moment. In some instances, it's strategic because certain events blow up, your kind of data. On others, they just haven't been a priority. But as the business changes, we kind of evaluate that. We implement new events. We may be focusing on a specific product, so we dive deeper and we'll implement that. And then others, maybe we're not using them, and there's an opportunity to kind of again tighten that up, reduce your data, dependencies, and so yeah, it's definitely a constant evolution, I would say, and that's where you guys have just been a great partner to help us understand why, not just because.
You guys both mentioned something that I think is I guess a pain point for a lot of businesses is the resourcing and talent. And I'd love to hear, I think, from everyone else that's joined us from across Africa, if it's the same thing over there. It's a struggle for businesses, I suppose, just things that we've seen, like hiring is always sometimes where things come undone, whether it's the budget or finding the talent. So I think whilst it's still in its infancy here in South Africa, there's definitely been a shift locally for enterprises to start to focus on growth and product and hiring growth officers or focusing on building entirely new departments. It of course goes hand in hand with digital transformation. But I'm sure everyone here is kind of keen to hear, I think, from Brad, like, what does growth look like for Kuda in such a fast innovating industry such as fintech? And what is your internal setup, such as tech reporting, team skills, and how has it kind of allowed you to remain competitive?
Yeah, it's a good one. Just touching on the resourcing thing, it really is challenging because I think it is such a new skill set in Africa. I think I only recently kind of got the missing piece to our puzzle, which is a really strong data analyst that kind of understands marketing and growth and metrics. Luckily I've had our product lead on for a while, who's also has a really kind of strong understanding there. But it's taken a long time. I mean, to kind of really get those pieces, and we've had some misfires. It's just part of the evolution, right? Not everybody kind of gets it, but so yeah, I think that journey is one that you have to undertake, and it's challenging. But in terms of like, I guess Kuda and our kind of growth story, it probably really started before even I joined, with the kind of founding team. The kind of, obviously early days for Kuda was all about building the brand and getting initial scale to be trusted as a bank. We're obviously disrupting a very traditional space in Nigeria, so having that trust is super important. And early initiatives included sponsoring Big Brother, working with influencers like Fireboy and other kind of big stars in Nigeria. And then also kind of a really kind of strong focus on digital acquisition, where we were kind of really ahead of the competition. Obviously, everybody kind of learns and catches up, so you need to keep innovating on the marketing side. And on the product side, also, again, kudos to the kind of founding team. 25 free transfers was a great catalyst for growth. So yeah, I think early days it was about building the brand, and just kind of real kind of acceleration of customers to kind of get the product in their hands and get that visibility. Now that we're at a certain size and we have that reputation, growth focus shifts a little bit, from pure acquisition at any cost to increasing customer engagement, getting the right customer on board, focusing on retention, and then ultimately, revenue and monetization. Talking about it like internally, like, how we set it up, our growth product side, the North Star metric has been about product penetration this year. And we've seen customers adopting more of our products and services they on board, so that's fantastic. And then on kind of the core product side, we continue to build new products, offerings, whether that's credit or a B2B product. And that's ultimately helping deliver on our vision of being this money app for Africans, with a wide product suite to meet customer needs. So yeah, a little bit of evolution as you kind of go through the different stages of the company. On the internal setup also of the team, definitely evolved there too. It started out obviously just with me. Thankfully, we've scaled up with people that are much more skilled in the various areas. So that's across marketing, product, data, and engineering. So really kind of this full squad that can kind of work together and move the needle essentially. I've also streamlined the marketing team. Originally we were focused on different stages of the funnel, so acquisition and activation and retention, to being focused more on the business units as we kind of scale up retail and in business. So we've streamlined some things there, and on the product side we've managed to kind of scale that up to 4 key kind of units. One focused on optimization, another really centered around customer advocacy, so how the customer is kind of engaging with the brand, and whether that's referrals or loyalty, so on. And then we have web. Obviously it's still a key part to the growth story. We are predominantly app focused, but web has that really important area of SEO and kind of that awareness and acquisition. And then we have a PM to focus on our platforms. So again, kind of that is kind of that real kind of requirement. If you're going to build a growth team and a growth stack, like you have to manage these platforms, right? Like they're constantly innovating. We're constantly evaluating which partners we're working with and which new technology to bring in. It's a fast-paced environment, so having somebody there who can, again, have the expertise and focus on that, we can get the most out of the platforms. So that's, again, going from me to like really kind of specializing and having specific units in each of the different areas. I mentioned the missing piece of the puzzle is on the data side. Have a fantastic data lead now, and we're kind of scaling up that team. And again, we'll start to provide insights. Going back to what I think earlier in the presentation, we were talking about, the pool of different teams. Like we have a core data team. They're very focused on the core infrastructure of data, credit, but the insights from whether, kind of customer interaction, it's really challenging to kind of put that on a core data team's plate. So that's why we're kind of expanding the growth data area to kind of bring more customer insights. So a bit of kind of internal setup is definitely involved, and we continue to grow and specialize. And then in terms of the tech, also I mentioned we're constantly evaluating. I think we're in a really solid position with our tech right now. We've been on a journey with a lot of our partners over the past few years where we have it working really well now, and we can leverage it to kind of push data to different platforms. And even the team, next phase for us is really to leverage everything that we have so that it's greater than the sum of the parts, essentially.
If it does feel like growth tends to touch every part of the business, so I was thinking in my head, like, what don't you do there? But I think, Tom, from your side, as a sales engineer at Mixpanel, having worked with other clients, are there other trends you've been seeing in terms of how companies are structuring themselves internally when it comes to growth?
Yeah, I mean, Brad's raised an interesting point of building out squads. So actually, that's kind of a bit of an exception to the norm, is what we see. We often see businesses bringing in teams, for instance, like product marketing managers, right, which really specifically bridges that gap between product and marketing. That's probably the most common approach that we're seeing at the moment. So some businesses picking up that maybe slightly more marketing focused product manager who knows how the product really can be sold to various and advertised to various organizations. And we are seeing this approach of teams starting to use the same tooling, whether that's being teched up on maybe a BI tool or using something like Mixpanel. Those two approaches of maybe having a single person who has the skills of both teams or getting both teams skilled up, those are the main trends we really see at the moment.
Yeah, if I can just jump in there, it's actually quite interesting because we're definitely also scaling up our product marketing managers, and they're essentially a bridge between us and marketing and product. So they kind of also forming that pivotal role where they're very deeply entrenched with product and kind of liaising with the marketing team and kind of building that strategy. Where we come in is the technical execution. So working with the platforms, we're essentially the experts of all of these kind of platforms in the growth stack. So very much, definitely seeing kind of product marketing managers growing. And I think it's definitely having a really positive impact on our business. But we continue, and that again goes back to, like, I guess how we've set up the team is that we're the data led, kind of data focused on both product and marketing. So, and it may be something unique to Kuda just in terms of the setup that we have.
Well, I think like just getting down to data and obviously speed to insights and agility is super important, particularly in your world. I guess, can you recall any instances where data interpretation has led to some unexpected kind of decisions? And I guess, how did your kind of organization respond to this, and any like cool outcomes you've kind of seen in that space?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a game changer having real-time analytics. I have various reports sent to me every single day, and we're kind of keeping an eye on multiple metrics. But I think the real key is having that ability to dive deeper into the insights. You can set up your kind of main KPIs to come from the back end, and you get this report sent. But diving into it is where it will kind of fall down, because as Tom kind of alluded earlier, like, you put in a request and it might be 2 weeks later, and we need to move fast. So surface level metrics are great, but it's really about like what's underneath those metrics. To give you an example, there's a recent scenario where one of our primary business lines experienced a month over month decline. And initially the cause is not really apparent, because we have a fairly complex, the business line has multiple products in it, multiple partners. So, you're kind of looking at this number going down and you're scratching your head. It could be competitor activity, it could be technical issues. what really happened. So, again, my product lead, Scott, was able to kind of really kind of dive into the details in Mixpanel, kind of see like what was changing. And, we discovered that like a specific product had been removed by one of our partners. So, really detailed and like not something that you would have noticed. So, this allowed the team to really kind of engage with the partner for one and kind of understand like what has been removed and why and the impact that it's having on us. But it also allows then on the kind of marketing front to kind of shift gears and address that gap, such as like, changing our messaging, pushing other products, and just really being responsive to that change. And that's just, one example. I think we're definitely, and again, like I was saying, we're leveraging the stack more and more. And now that we have the right events, we have the right insights, not just all of them, but the ones that really matter to us. So, anytime a key metric moves, we're diving in and looking at, very, very specific product line type of changes. So yeah, it's great to have those insights and to be able to react fast.
Yeah, I guess it's those data-driven decisions beyond just your business, and I think that's where the nuggets kind of lie. Just being able to understand external impact on your apps and your acquisition or your adoption. It's pretty fascinating. I think we had been chatting earlier, and you had mentioned around the shift towards tech adoption. So, what metrics matter to your team specifically, and how do you use it to define and track growth? Because as we've spoken, like data and growth go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't do one without the other for sure. And it's, again, it's the bedrock to the way I've built the growth team essentially. So, like top line metrics like acquisition and MAU metrics will always remain crucial. But again, we kind of build out this extensive framework centered around metrics that steer our experimentation and guide our next area of focus. So we're constantly evaluating what those metrics are. Admittedly, again, the product team or the growth product team kind of dive much more into that than me, who kind of focuses more on the kind of top line stuff. But our primary focus has been top line product penetration, I think I mentioned, and that's been pivotal to define the metrics that drive those decisions, right? But as our company matures and the growth dynamic kind of shifts, and metrics such as deposit volume or retention are gaining more prominence, and that means we'll kind of realign our metrics decision tree, and that will kind of then drive what we look at and what we aim to kind of build or optimize based on those metrics. And to be honest, yeah, Mixpanel is kind of the perfect tool for this. Whether it's trying to get that strategic view that allows us to kind of change growth strategy, or for diving into those details, like I mentioned, that's like really kind of on an ad hoc basis to kind of give those insights to all of our stakeholders, whether it's the product team, maybe investors. Like we really just have that power to kind of move fast and look at any metric that we're essentially tracking.
I am just cognizant of time, and I do want to leave some minutes for some questions for everyone. But I think, Tom, we understand that like Mixpanel's selling point is obviously the agility, like there's instant access to insights, like real time. But I think, how have you seen your clients' day-to-day improve or operations improve as a consequence of having access to faster answers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it really comes down to teams stop building in a blind spot, right? I mean, I think the consistent theme today has been that that often when we don't have these tools in place and these processes in place, questions can take a long time to answer. And unfortunately, in a agile and fast-moving market like fintech is, we need to not wait that 2 weeks. We have to have those questions answered now. We have to have those features built now, because unfortunately, there's going to be another customer offering from a different organization tomorrow. Right? So when customers start building these features fast and rapidly, and they don't have that data to see that real-time insights, that means that they build features in the wrong way. Okay. And when they build features in the wrong way, obviously they don't get the outcomes they want. The KPIs don't go up in the right ways they want. And it doesn't paint the full picture of what they're trying to achieve. Okay. And that day-to-day thing that you mentioned, if they have real access to that data, that that data becomes part of the day-to-day. It's build the feature, iterate, check the data, iterate. And this whole process becomes this constant product loop cycle, where often when teams don't have this kind of mixed panel or process in place, it's kind of 3/4 of a circle. And that gap is the thing that they have to bridge by guesswork at the end of the day, or waiting that 2 weeks. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that especially in a market like fintech, having that delay in data just doesn't really work anymore.
Tom, would you be able to perhaps share your screen? I think kind of show us the access to the real-time insights that we have there. And I think, Tom, whilst you're setting up, if there's any questions from anyone on the call, potentially just lining up on the side and we can answer as we go through, or if there's something that you'd specifically like Tom to cover or show you, now would be an amazing time to let us know.
Cool. Cami, you might have to stop sharing your screen for this one. I think I'll need to take it over.
Sure. Okay, hold on.
Grab it off. There we go. That's
Yeah.
good. That's one.
Yeah, whilst you say, I see there's a question. If I can quickly address that.
Fire away. Yeah, fire away, Brad.
Yeah. All right, fire it up, Austin. Yeah. So, Cassidy, you asked if a company can only afford one, what should be prioritized, growth or marketing, and can they and should they be the same? For me, I mean, it depends. If you can find a really strong growth leader who understands marketing very well, then that would be great. But I definitely think kind of growth comes after marketing. Again, I joined Kuda after really the founding team that set up, the position of the brand. Like there was already a brand identity, likewise on the product side. So growth really can't operate without those core teams that kind of really build that core offering or core product. We're really coming in and optimizing that and kind of putting the icing on the cake in a sense. So yeah, I think you really have to have a strong marketer who can build the brand from the get-go, and then you come in with more of the analytics and kind of data-led approach.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I absolutely agree that the marketing does come first, because growth sometimes is natural, which is always quite nice. That organic growth is sometimes the best bit. Cool. Right. Well, we'll show some Mixpanel then, because why not, right? And we're just going to do a really, really short workflow today. I'm a little bit conscious of time, but we're going to focus on something that maybe isn't explicitly growth, but is absolutely tied to growth, right? And that's retention. Because of course, if we don't keep our users, we grow maybe if we have that really aggressive growth strategy, but unfortunately that becomes very expensive as a business. Okay, so we're just going to focus on some retention today, and this is just the finance data set that you can find on Mixpanel's website if you'd like to play along at home or after this call, for instance. But to address the retention problem that this data set may or may not have, we're going to have a quick look at the retention report in Mixpanel. I mean, Mixpanel has 4 core reports, and they're all built in this same way of those events that Brad and I have talked about throughout this call. Okay. And the events that we're tracking in this finance dummy data set are things which we'd all expect to use on a day-to-day basis. It's things like making a transfer, opening new accounts, simply logging in, right? And we're going to focus on that making a transfer today, because as a fintech business, we make a lot of our money on commission from transfers, for instance, and we would like to know how many people come back, or what's the likelihood they come back if they do make a transfer. Effectively, do they like our transfer process? Okay, and we get this nice retention curve, which effectively says if a user makes a transfer today, they're about 93% likely to come back and make another transfer, which I think we'll agree is pretty great. Okay, but imagine they don't, right? And we don't really see our users again for maybe, what is this, like 26 days. We go down to a 66% retention rate, which means we lose about, what's that, a third of our users, 30% of our users in that first 4-week period. Yes, there's a little bit of a spike, but maybe that's because we're doing some re-engagement just afterwards. But it looks like in the short term, we have a little bit of a retention problem. Okay. And often people try and address retention problems with things like offers and gifts and all this kind of thing. But actually, we can do some quite clever product things to really try and drive that retention rate. Okay. And we're going to try and discover something that's important here. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to use one of Mixpanel's advanced reports, which is called Signal. Okay, and that's all about correlations with ideal user actions. Okay, and it looks a little bit different to our retention report, but it's all about trying to get my users to do a specific goal. In this case, I want them to retain over a 4-week period, something as simple as that. And we're going to ask the question, how is that correlated with some of my top events, the events which are most likely to be correlated with my end goal? Okay, and we've pressed the correlate button. Looks like it's pretty quick in this case, but we start to get some events that we might see that is linked to that long-term retention. Okay, and some of them we might expect, right, which is making a transfer at least 5 times in a 2-week period, for instance. Some of them are opening a new account. Fair enough. If you're having a savings account and a checking account, for instance, that's highly linked with retention. But also we get some more interesting ones, right? Which is something like enabling Touch ID, right? We've all got phones. We've all got our fingerprints and our faces in those phones. And actually, businesses having that as part of the login process or the sign-up process really helps retention because it reduces the barrier to entry. Okay, and we can prove this as a concept here, because if we take this enable Touch ID, what we can do is we can group the users who have done this in the last 30 days into a group called a cohort, right? And if we just go back to our retention report very quickly and we create one of these cohorts, we could look at those users who have enabled that Touch ID as an example. And we'll call these the Touch ID users, something like that. Okay. We have 24,000 users who've enabled Touch ID. It looks like it's a pretty seamless process here. But if we can create and compare this cohort, we get this quite dramatic difference in retention rates, right? So before, I think we were at about 66% retention rate. So actually we boost that retention rate by 10% just by getting our users to use Touch ID, right? Whereas if our users don't implement Touch ID, they actually fall off a cliff, right? The retention rate is just non-existent, possibly because this is dummy data, but more likely is there's an additional barrier to getting our users into the app to keep that product adoption, or as Brad called it, that product penetration. Okay, and I think we've just spent about 5 minutes and maybe a dozen clicks on Mixpanel, but I just wanted to share how that speed to insight, that real-time data really can pull out answers very, very quickly.
Thanks, Tom. I think you guys would have seen Kelvin's asked if you have any questions, please pop it in the Q&A. But also, if you want a personalized demo or you want to chat to Tom a little bit further, please let us know and we can arrange that session for you. Tom loves loves sharing data and loves helping you figure out, I guess, where things are getting a little bit stuck. So definitely please reach out. We can sort that out. And I'm going to prompt you guys to also connect with Brad and Tom, myself, all of us on LinkedIn. It'd be great to keep the conversation going. What we are doing for those of you that are based in Cape Town, we are actually going to be launching a data drafts community. Tom and Brad will be there next week. So let us know if you'd like to join. We can keep the conversations going there over some beers. And if you are in Cape Town, I think you'll understand how much that is needed with the heat wave that is potentially coming in. How recording of the session, yes, that will be sent through. So you can definitely share it with your teams for those of you that were unable to make it. Thank you, Tom. Tom shared his LinkedIn. I'm just going to see if there's any other Q&As coming through. No. But guys, as always, if you think of something a little bit later, please send it through. We can always do some typed out responses. And be sure just to follow us on LinkedIn, please. We'll be continuing this growth series as we keep chatting about product and growth, particularly across Africa and South Africa. A big thank you to Kelvin, Brad, Tom, and Daria, who you don't see. She's behind the scenes. She was changing our face from circles into squares on stage. Thank you, Daria. But guys, wishing you all a beautiful week ahead. Oh, you'd like a demo? Brilliant, Tapelo. We'll just take down your details and get in touch with you. Just in the last 4 minutes, just see if there's any other comments going through. Yes, Daria, yeah. Thanks, Cass. Thank you for your question. Brad, thank you for picking up on the answer. Guys, and I guess one more big thank you from us for joining. It's been amazing to have you on board and for us building this community across growth and product. So thank you. And for those that have joined, as I said, from across Africa, we really appreciate it. I know there's some from Europe. Thank you. Yes, the session is recorded. And we'll share it all with you. I think it'll actually be sent through in an email. And thank you for the compliments. Guys, wishing everyone a great week ahead.
Brilliant. Cool. Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Good.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.